1, 2, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. In the place to be. In the place.
Mic check.
He asked the mootness issue, and it was like, all right, good job. We came today for oral arguments in our appeal on the stay against our Freedom of Information Act that was brought first in New York State Court to compel the Department of Health to turn over public records to the community and to the Coalition for a New Village Hospital. In the process of determining that, the debtors in St. Vincent's, in the bankruptcy court in St. Vincent's, brought a motion to stay our proceedings, claiming that it impacted the debtors' assets. And the bankruptcy court judge ruled in favor of the debtors, claiming that the interests of the public to hold their elected officials accountable must yield to the interests of the debtor. And we disagree. We think that there is no inherent conflict between the orderly administration of a bankruptcy proceeding and the right for the public to access public records. So we appealed that decision. We went through a briefing process, and today we came in front of the Honorable Rakoff, Judge Rakoff, to make our arguments for why we believe that the people still have a right to get these documents and that they're necessary for the community to get this information.
And how do you think the judge responded to your appeal?
I think Judge Rakoff is very intelligent, he's very thoughtful, he's very wise. I think he listened to both sides. I think he seemed to understand what our concerns were. I initially started to wax political with focusing on platitudes of constitutional law, and he basically wanted to focus just on the specifics in terms of what the standards were in terms of determining that the appeal should be granted, and I was encouraged by that. We focused on those issues, and what we basically said was that first of all, that there was a clear error in terms of the facts being determined by the bankruptcy court judge, and that the application of law in the bankruptcy court decision was also incorrect, which the law is something that this court can review de novo. And that in doing so, it relied on the representations by the debtor that in essence the public's FOIL request was merely a facade and a cover-up for efforts to bring a claim for fraud and to recover civil monies from, I guess, the debtor, which clearly was not our purpose. As you know, the coalition has been very engaged for the last year in efforts to bring about information. I think it was interesting what the judge said from the bench about the importance of FOIL information, and that this is something necessary to ensure that the public hold their elected and appointed officials accountable. So I'm encouraged by what happened today, but we have to wait and see. And this is, as we've said again and again, this is a marathon and not a sprint. So I think it was good to show up today, and we're waiting to hear hear the decision when it comes down.
So let's say the ruling is in your favor. This is next week, the judge said?
Hopefully the judge will make a determination and the ruling will come down next week. If we win, we'll be able to continue our efforts to get the Department of Health to turn over public records regarding the closure of St. Vincent's Hospital, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay, what's next for the coalition?
April 30th, we're going to have a big rally commemorating the one-year anniversary of the closing of St. Vincent's Hospital. It'll be at 2 p.m. at the St. Vincent's site.
And anything else you want to add?
No, we're just going to keep on, hopefully people will show up. I thank people for coming out today, for their continued support, and let's keep our fingers crossed and see what happens.
This FOIL that is being talked about is basically information that people like me and Tim and members of the coalition and people that live in the community really just want to know what happened. And we've been left in the dark, and so we came down to support this hearing and to support Yetta and the hard work that the coalition attorneys have been doing. And it's not the goal of the coalition, at least as far as I know, to be talking about filing fraud charges. that's really the position of the district attorney, and this, there are other places where that could play, but we don't know what happened.
The bankruptcy judge.
We don't know what happened, and to be told that we didn't have a right to public information to this citizen seemed really shocking, without knowing the legal context.
There's you can't fill on the steps to the federal building.
Okay, fine.
We're excited that although it was a little confusing to hear all the legal talk that goes back and forth between lawyers, it seemed to me, quite frankly, that the St. Vincent's attorneys were ill-prepared and couldn't answer most of the questions that were being asked by the judge. The judge seemed to be very fair. I have no clue which way he's going to go, but his questions were fair and intelligent, and I think that he challenged both sides to give intelligent answers, and I have to say our team was prepared.
What kind of documents would be released?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we don't know what the documents are. That's the purpose of a FOIL request. But what we'd ask for is all of the documents related to the closure of St. Vincent's Hospital. Now, we do know under state law that the hospital is required to retain and keep information regarding its runnings, and we do know that a hospital before it closes needs to submit a closure plan to the Department of Health, which needs to be reviewed and approved and transmitted back to the hospital before the closure begins. Our understanding, based on earlier submissions and information that was provided to us, is that there were at least 2 closure plans submitted, but we don't know. That's the purpose of a Freedom of Information request, is because we as a public have a right to get that information.
And it's really upsetting to me as a constituent of some elected officials that my local elected officials haven't led this fight. We had the Senate chair of the Health Committee and the Assembly chair of the Health Committee both come from our district, and yet they didn't raise their voices asking for this kind of documentation. And I'm just very grateful that we had a coalition, 6,000 people strong, that kept pushing forward. And I want to thank Yetta and the attorneys that were present in court today, because I feel totally powerless about how to find out what the hell went on and how this happened. And I think that we're entitled as people that live in this district, and we expected, I certainly, and this is my own opinion, I'm not speaking for anyone else here, I expected my elected officials, Christine Quinn, my city council person, the Speaker of the House, Tom Duane, the state senator from my district, and Richard Godfrey, the assembly member who headed the health committee, to have asked these questions, and they didn't. We've had to rely on, and thank God we had the coalition